Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 2-hour chart provided by netdandia.com. You can click on the link below. Now, I had earlier pointed out in my blog that 3050 would be a key resistance point that we need to break through. You can see on this chart that we're just barely ticking through that point, and there's not a lot of volume, and of course the MACD is completely flatlined because of the change that we've had that's so dramatic. So if we go in closer, you can see we spiked up to 3060. Now if you remember the video I did yesterday about the overnight rallies and the daily smackdowns, we're just going to have to wait and see if the Asian forces can force the price higher overnight through key technical points. If you remember in the May smackdown, specifically and a little bit in the September smackdown, we had key technical points broached during the off hours. So it's quite possible that we may get something like that in the off hours on the upside. So those things can work both ways. Obviously, Asia is coming on strong. As I pointed out yesterday, China is very tight-lipped about their precious metals buying. A lot of people have speculated that that's because they're not interested in any kind of direct confrontation, but are more interested in simply accumulating and looking at the long view. So on the daily chart here, you can see we're right at that key level of 3051. We can definitely go one way or the other. Our MACD on the daily is about to break into positive territory. That would be very bullish. You can see that ever since the May smackdown, we really have only had one penetration to the upside, which is right here. And that resulted in a rally that went to almost $45. Then the next decline brought us up to the zero line, and we declined again. So this is going to be a real critical point. We also want to look at the weekly because we've been following this weekly MACD. The last time we crossed over, we did just barely cross over right before the September smackdown. And that was again where we neared that 45 price. So we have put in a bottom here on the MACD, at least temporarily so, unless we turn lower. And that is marking the tie for the most oversold we've been. You can see all the way back to the Buffett buy back here and even before. So we're looking for that MACD to cross over to the upside. And it's quite possible that we will see an explosive rally that will bring that MACD up to the zero line. And then, of course, it has to cross over. You can see that it came up to the zero line here in the 2008 decline, crossed over, and then that was the beginning of a very slow rally, just building from that under $10 to about the 17. And then, of course, with the advent of QE2, it just absolutely exploded to the upside. So possibly with the advent of QE3, we may see something similar. So that's a silver chart. Now I wanted to do a big shout out to Yunin Slaver, who managed to help me with my, I gotta check my time here, with my recording, because as you know, I've been struggling with sound problems, and I spent a number of hours tonight recording in Microsoft ADCPM and all kinds of stuff you don't even want to know about what you want to record in. I've learned more about audio than I thought I'd ever want to know in 10 lifetimes, but that's the way it is. I really hate having bad audio, and so it's important enough to me to spend a lot of time on that. Hopefully this is a better recording, and I appreciate this advice because I think a lot of the buzz was coming from the power feeding through. So hopefully this one's going to turn out a lot better. Now, I want to take you over to the blog real quick because I'm in the process of attempting, as you know, or you may not know, this is a WordPress.com blog. And for those of you who don't know, you have WordPress.com and WordPress.org. WordPress.com is the free blogging location where you can sign up free blogs and there's no ads or anything like that. WordPress.org is the self-hosted. It's the same software. You can use the same software, but you have to manage that yourself. So I'm in the process of trying to migrate to WordPress.org, and there's some glitches that are happening, and that's causing the font to be very small. So I want you to bear with me on that. I've had to switch the font back to the default so that I can migrate. That's why the font is so small. If you do have a problem, you can just hold your control key down and scroll in, and you can make the blog as large font as you want just by scrolling in. So, and of course it's going to function. You can play the videos. They're all going to play. And
3 minutes for the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Paul.
So that should all work, but hopefully once the migration occurs, that's all going to be ancient history. So I appreciate you bearing with me during some of these transitions. Now, I wanted to look at the key topic of the night, and as you may know, Wikipedia is down. So I was actually searching for the Capital Controls article on Wikipedia, but it's not available. So when you go to Google and you put in Capital Controls, and you're always going to get your first hit is going to be Wikipedia, and you get a little taste of the article and then you're blacked out. So Wikipedia is doing the full bore protest against SOPA. If you don't know what that is, that's the Stop Online Piracy Act that is working its way through the Congress. And of course, the United States government has determined that it is going to be the arbiter of the entire internet. Now, of course, to anybody who works in this industry, and of course I do, that's my job, it's a transparent and pathetic attempt to control the internet, which is going to fail. Either way it's going to fail, whether the act passes or whether the act fails. I don't think the act is going to pass. So that's why Wikipedia is not available, but we do have Investopedia, and I wanted to look at this issue of capital controls so we can look at that in the perspective of silver and what's happening with silver. So for those of you who don't know or don't really understand what capital controls are, this is the definition we're given. Any measure taken by a government, and I apologize, I've had a lot of complaints about not scrolling in. Any measure taken by a government, central bank, or other regulatory body to limit the flow of foreign capital in and out of a domestic economy. This includes taxes, tariffs, outright legislation, and volume restrictions, as well as market-based forces. Capital controls can affect many asset classes such as equities, bonds, and foreign exchange trades. Tight capital controls are most often found in developing economies where the capital reserves are lower and more susceptible to volatility. And it goes on. So capital controls are the sorts of things that you see in third world countries where the government is not above board, I will say. If you remember, if you haven't read the Jimmy Rogers book, Investment Biker, I'll go ahead and link that for you. I highly suggest that you read that book. Jimmy Rogers, he actually did it twice. once on a motorcycle, I think, and another time in a Jeep or something. But he's traveled the world, and he's visited just about every country in the world. And if you read Investment Biker, sorry about the warning, if you read Investment Biker, he talks about how he is crossing borders and finding black markets when he crosses the border. And that's a way that you gauge the strength of the government as far as freedom and the strength of the currency. If you go into a country and cross the border and find black markets trading in the currency, and then you go and try to exchange your currency at the official bank, and you find that there's a big disparity between the black market price of the currency and the official rate, then you know you're in a country with exchange controls. And capital controls go along with that, where they're trying to prevent capital from fleeing an economy. Now, the reason I'm bringing this topic up is because I think capital controls actually are related to silver and gold. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the tendency of people to flee into the precious metals is a similar motivation that you have when you have people trying to flee the country with their cash or their savings or their capital. So capital that is saved up, in other words, savings within a country, looks to be rewarded with interest or with profits, and that's how you encourage businesses, and that's how you actually have a healthy economy. Now, governments who try to control capital, and of course America is interested in consumption and not savings, so we're going down the wrong path, and down the wrong path rapidly. But these countries often try to restrict the flow of capital to more favorable sovereignties which have more favorable returns for the capital. So that's why you have capital controls. Now, my contention here is that silver and gold actually are the same thing. What they are is internal capital flight. And of course, the cartel that we've been dealing with over the longest time, their primary interest is to prevent this capital flight. So that's my contention. That's why we have the attempt to suppress the precious metal prices, because capital internally to all these countries is attempting to flee the inflation and potential hyperinflationary actions of the governments. And since they can't flee anywhere because all the governments are involved in this, we're actually seeing what I would call internal capital flight to the precious metals. And of course, that's what we're involved with here. And that's why we encourage you to keep stacking, because I think ultimately the governments will take the option of printing money, which is the easy way out, and that's going to cause inflation or even hyperinflation. And at that point, the only thing you want to have your money in is something that is not somebody else's debt obligation that can be reneged upon or inflated away. And we'll talk to you next time.